We are T minus 27 minutes plus until the start of tonight's live draft coverage. Hello and welcome in everybody to the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network. I am at Eric Balkman on the X. My name is Eric Balkman. You know me from the RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown. And of course, the Fantasy Football Players Championship, the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour as well. Coming up on tonight's show, we are going to have basically a half hour of pregame until the main event that starts at the bottom of the hour. My guest tonight, the OG Fantasy, Theo Gremminger from PlayerProfiler, as well as Dave Terpoilli at Dave Terp on the X. They are going to be drafting a team in the FFPC Best Ball Tournament as they gun for that $300,000 grand prize. We'll take you all the way through the draft or until 9 o'clock hits, whatever happens first. And then if there is some time left, we'll kind of reflect on the draft. We'll talk about our favorite teams. We'll talk about our favorite picks. And hopefully you can glean everything you need to know tonight from witnessing this draft on how you can win not only a $300,000 grand prize in the Best Ball Tournament, but apply the tactics you're seeing from tonight's drafters to winning $1 million grand prize in the Fantasy Pros Championship, with drafts filling up each and every day over at myffpc.com. That is a $6 million prize pool. Go to myffpc.com to register for the main event, another contest with a $1 million grand prize that both of these guys are going to be competing in this year. And then don't forget about the Dynasty Startups and the Empire Dynasty Startup leagues that are going on over at myffpc.com. If you want to play fantasy football 365 days a year, chances are you do because you're watching this show. So I would recommend that you want to sign up for one of those Dynasty Startups or Empire startup leagues over at myffpc.com. Shout out to our producer, Matt Deutsch, behind the glass. And I want to welcome in tonight's drafting cohorts. You know both of these guys. They've been on this show numerous times. Dave Terpoilli at Dave Terp on the X. And, of course, the OG Fantasy, Theo Gremminger, the director of basically everything like media content over at PlayerProfiler. Theo, I'll introduce you first. Theo Gremminger somehow not recording a podcast for PlayerProfiler right now, so we're lucky enough to have him aboard tonight. Welcome in.
I always make time for you two guys. I love coming on and chopping it up. And Dave and I put together some nasty builds, so looking forward to drafting a little bit with my man Terp tonight.
It's interesting, Theo, because I wonder if you have those cans on, the headphones on. Does it feel weird when you don't have them on? I feel like you have them on more than you have them off.
Well, I usually leave them like this, so you can't even tell, my hair doesn't get messed up. But it's nighttime.
It's gotta annoy you sometimes.
It's all good these days. This time of night, I'm ready to put them on. I'm ready to chop it up. But yeah, no, it's I'm happy to be back here tonight, guys. I love FFPC. I love going to Vegas. I'm still a player first, so I'm doing a lot of content. But it's funny. It's like, all these people are like, years ago I could kind of get away with it and kind of talk about the guys I like on like pods and all that. Now I'm in a 750 RotoViz Triflex Dynasty Startup on FFPC, and somebody drafted Malik Neighbors like ahead of ADP, and they knew I was going to draft him, and they like start talking all this trash to me. And I don't even know this guy, and he's like talking trash to me. It's like, oh, did you get sniped, Theo? Did you get sniped, Theo? And I'm like, yeah, he kind of sniped me. So I did the adult thing, and I used the full 8-hour clock. Like, you talk trash,
you have to teach him a lesson.
I'm not gonna pick for 8 hours. So there you go. Enjoy it. And actually, it was like towards the evening too. So it was probably like 16, 17 hours, just mentally exhausting to have to deal with that.
Good, he deserved it.
Yeah, and I got Laporta. I took Laporta, so it wasn't like the end of the world.
And that's the thing. It's just like, well, what do you want from me, guy? I got sniped. I'm on tilt right now. I need every minute of this clock I can to try to figure this out. Dave Terpoilli also joining tonight. You guys have drafted together several times already this year. Terp, welcome in. I know you're excited to get things going tonight. I'll offer you the first question here, as we are about 23 minutes until the top of the hour. You guys are until the start of the draft, I should say. You guys are drafting 9th tonight. How much of the strategy, once you know where you're picking, how much of the strategy for the first 2 rounds is based on where you're picking, given that a lot can still happen in the first round, right?
I mean, it's kind of wide open. We're going to see what falls. I mean, we have some sort of idea of a player or two that we like if, it goes based off ADP. But hopefully, every draft that we do, there's always that wacky pick. I mean, I feel like there's always that guy. The 2 nights ago, today's Thursday, Tuesday's night stream, St. Brown went 1. We had Breece Hall go 1. We've had Garrett Wilson go 1. in 3 streams that we've done this year. So I expect craziness, and craziness only benefits us at the end of the draft.
Theo, you've done a lot of FFPC drafts this year, both fantasy pros and best ball tournament, Superflex, never too early best ball tournament. I'm kind of curious as to what your preconceived notions are entering a draft, given what kind of Terp just said about like how not only do you not know how the first round is going to go, you don't even know how the first pick is going to go overall in this. And I think it's one of those things where unless you can roll with the punches, you're kind of behind the 8 ball, right?
I agree with Terp. I mean, if we were picking second or third, I think it would be more of a big deal. But when you're picking ninth, like all the craziness will happen at the beginning. Maybe somebody gets reached ahead of us. But when you're in like the tail end of the first round, I actually think it's kind of easy this year at this time. Like 9, 10, 11, 12, you're going to walk away with 2 guys you really, really like. I think the challenge that comes, especially in a best ball tournament like this, at like that 3-4 turn, that's probably a little bit more tilting for Terp and I than the first and second round. First and second round is like, sit back and there's options galore for building like a dangerous build. I don't mind the 12 spot right now. I think the 12 spot is fun. So I think we're pretty good right now. The variance, you just kind of have to roll with the punches. It's never going to be like crazy. There might be like 1 or 2 picks that are off, but it usually kind of settles back, after like the big names are off the board.
Tuesday, I know, Theo, you popped into the chat with our Fantasy Pros coverage. You had talked about at the 11-12 spot, you've been seeing, and you think you're going to continue to see bully tight end there, right? Like Laporta and whatever other tight end, Kelsey, Andrews, what have you. That's what you expect to see in a lot of drafts this year. Will you personally be implementing that strategy if you have the 11 or 12 pick?
So I had Darren Armani, Fantasy Mojo, on to press coverage, one of my podcasts, and we talked about this a little bit. I just think every year it's like some guys are going to get steamed up that we like around that 1-2 turn, and I think that people are going to try to find an edge. And this year with tight end sort of getting pushed down a little bit, and you don't see like tight end 1 going off the board in like the top 5 picks like we're used to with a Kelsey. I think when we get to Vegas, I think a lot more people are going to attempt that strategy where it's a tight end start. You not only have something that's sort of unique and a potential catch up type pick, but you also are kind of forcing teams to drive up those tight ends 3, 4, 5. You might end up with a little bit more to choose from at your 3-4 turn pick. That's like kind of I keep bringing up the 3-4 turn. Like the 3-4 turn to me is the interesting one, especially in FFPC, because if you don't go with the tight end in one of your first 2 selections, you get boxed out of like all those top options, and you find yourself having to potentially move up a guy, that's going a little bit later into that 4th round consideration, which kind of makes you lose your edge a little bit. So I do think you'll see that in Vegas, Eric. I think that's like, it's just an edge I think that's going to happen. It's the latest we've seen tight end 1 going off the board in an FFPC draft in quite some time. So I think the dust will kind of settle when we get to late August, and I think that's going to become more and more common.
It's interesting too. And Terp, I don't know how you feel about this, but like when you talk about going on the offensive, right? When you have and it doesn't have to necessarily be at the 11-12, it could be at the 1-2 as you get deeper and deeper into drafts. Is there something to be said for that? You want to build your team the way you want, but there almost is something to be said for trying to put other people in tough positions. And I think that's what Theo's talking about here too, with those tight ends at the end of the first round, early second round. Do you think that just in general, how much do you like to go on the offensive when you are drafting at the end? I think a lot of people think you have to draft defensively there, right? You have to get your guy. You don't want to be boxed out on a quarterback or a tight end or anything like that. But sometimes I think like going on the offensive and making other people think that way, it almost serves you well to be being able to get your guys in a better way, right?
I agree. I mean, everything you said is pretty much spot on. I mean, you're going to see a lot of the bully tight end at the end of these drafts right now because guys that are picking from, we'll just say 9 to 12. I mean, they're trying to gain the advantage that, above the CeeDee Lamb drafters and the McCaffrey drafters and all that the perceived notions out there that they have an advantage over everybody else. So they're thinking the tight end in the FFPC, scoring format and grabbing 2 of them, which easily could do this year. I mean, you have Laporta, you have Kelsey, you have Kincaid, you have McBride. You could push up Andrews if you really wanted to. It's not crazy. I mean, those 5 guys I just mentioned, if you don't take them, they're never coming back to you. Kyle Pitts is not coming back to you.
Mm-hmm.
So that's 6 tight ends right there that, I mean, you're going to be behind the 8 ball because most of the time these guys are going to move down, to the end of the first round. And the guys who got the top picks that people were saying, the Bijan Robinsons, the Lambs, the Tyreek Hills, they could also add the top tight end and kill any advantage that you try to build at the end. So to me, I mean, I would like to get a tight end in the first 2 picks, but we're going to see where the board falls. Not doing anything too crazy. I know my co-manager loves Dalton Kincaid, so he's going to be fighting me to take him. I'm on the Dan Williamson bandwagon with Dalton Kincaid, but this is why we're a partnership, because certain picks, don't look as good to you, but they look good to somebody else, and that could lead to a winning formula.
Last year when we drafted, we had some A-chain. Like we were on some dudes last year. I think we had one monster terp where we ended up missing on some quarterbacks, which ended up hurting us. But like every other spot,
we had a Puka and Kyren Williams team. Yeah. Our quarterbacks were Herbert and Kirk Cousins.
Yeah, so there you go.
So we were dead pretty much the last.
Yeah, I mean we had some really nice builds. You never can control it. Like
no,
this year the injury luck is going to be a little bit better at every position, but. Yeah, we were on some of those guys. Like structurally, we usually can kind of turn it around structurally and agree on things that way. So I rarely get in like arguments with Terp when I'm drafting with him.
No, we're usually on the same page.
Let me ask you this, Theo. In regards to because I know you draft a lot of redraft and best ball, and I know you probably got some dynasty startups going on right now. Now,
2 of them.
There you go. So now I know that from when you actually sit and think about it, analytically, okay, this is a startup draft. This is a best ball draft. This is a draft where I have to manage the team all year. You know that, right? But I think when you're doing multiple leagues like that, which I know, Terp, you do too, and I'm in the midst of it right now as well. When you have a situation when you're drafting 3 different types of leagues like that, and maybe you're doing more than that as well, which makes this even more difficult. How do you sort of keep that straight? How do you sort of like make sure that you're optimally charging your roster with the best possible assets for that particular league without getting it confused with the other ones? We talked about, and I'll give this as an example. I think you called it the rookie hangover, right? After we get done with dynasty rookie drafts, there's always Jeff Tirabassi, I know, always calls it rookie fever, right? How do you cure yourself of rookie fever when you start drafting those redraft leagues? It can be difficult. How difficult is it for you, a guy who's drafting multiple formats at the same time, seemingly all the time?
I think when you're drafting on a best ball tournament team like this, you sort of cut off the rest. Of course, you're going to still have kind of guys that are your guys for this year, but I think you're able to kind of cut it off and ignore what you've done and try to sort of treat it as like a standalone team. I think a lot of times people get and I think this is something where I enjoy drafting with Terp or Dan Williamson or Nelson Sousa and some guys, Billy Muzio, guys that are like experienced drafters are, like people sort of get caught up in, I have to be so unique, so unique, so unique. Like that's cool. But the first thing is we need to get through and actually qualify for the money weeks with this team. So I think we're able to kind of cut it off and not worry about being overly unique. Like the uniqueness will happen. I think that for me, I'm not going to worry about like what I've done in every other structure. I will say if you're going to max out these 125s or the $35 contest that FFPC offers, if you're going to max it out, you should start looking at, your roster percentage, your exposure to some guys. Maybe you've drawn the number 4 pick several times and you don't want to have the same pick at number 4 over it all again. But I think it gets a little bit sort of like overrated to try to be like incredibly unique unless you're at like crazy high volume. And for me, I'll get most of my 125s in somewhere after 4th of July. I do a lot of FFPC drafting now, but I'll do some slow 350s, some dynasty startups. And I'm trying to do the like max out some underdog contests as well. So like I'll get my 125s in, but right now I'm wide open, Terp. I'm not worried about roster percentage. I'm worried about
Absolutely not worried
drafting a
about it at
monster
all
with
right
you.
now because you can always catch up. I mean, if you are behind on a certain player, I mean, with these, we're all going to enter a bunch of these, and we're all going to be, spread, pretty well out. You're not going to have too crazy. I'm not in the big belief as much as I love guys in best ball. If you love guys and you're 60, 70% on these guys, it could really put you in a hurting. For instance, a guy like Christian Watson, who I loved last year, wasn't 60%, but I was in the 30s, and Christian Watson's, season really put me in a damper on some of these. So, it's definitely something to worry about. You want to just try to look at that as you get till July, August, obviously get to September. If, most of these contests are still open, to try to make sure your exposure, is right. And you're not like 2% on Christian McCaffrey last year. And that was a disaster if you were that way. So right now it's just all about structure to me. I mean, that's pretty much how I build everything right now. Exactly what Theo said.
Terp, is there like any players, like when you start drafting early in January, February, March, or even before the NFL draft, are there any players that you look at like, okay, I want to get a lot of shares of this guy now because I know his value is going to go up, and then I won't have to draft him then because I already have these early shares of him where I got him much later. Are there any players like that, or is it just kind of like you're rolling with the draft and you'll see where these guys are going? Maybe it happens, maybe it doesn't. I'm just kind of curious to your thoughts on that.
100%. I mean, there's guys that I'm trying to get more of, with all the drafts I'm doing daily, just trying to get as many, a guy like perfect example is Malik Neighbors, where he's going in drafts right now. It's only going to take one big preseason, catch or, positive weekly vibe to move him up to the end of the, third round up into the second round in some main event drafts. So guys like that, like Will Levis is starting to be very, very popular, around, the industry. A lot of very, very smart people, including myself, is on Will Levis. And I feel like in best ball, his value is pretty much dead right now, which I love, but it's going to start getting a little tick, especially adding all the weapons that he did. Guys like Calvin Ridley, same type of situation. But you could also see guys fall, and that's where you want to take advantage. Like Justin Jefferson's a perfect example. You're getting a great discount on probably the best receiver in football right now. If you're a believer in the Minnesota quarterback situation, which most people aren't, but if you're one of those people, you should be drafting all of the Justin Jefferson you can get right now because he's going 8th, 9th, 10th in some of these drafts. And realistically, with a good quarterback situation, let's just say Kirk Cousins was still there. Justin Jefferson's a top 3 pick. So if their quarterback situation, settles down a little bit, and hopefully Darnold takes a job early and just gets the ball to Jefferson like most of us expect, I think Jefferson's a guy that could move up. But like you said, pretty much I target guys and try to get as much as I can now because I think they're going to move up. And most of the time they do. I mean, some of these big name fantasy guys, when they put out Zamir White's going to be my breakout guy, which always comes out, Draft Sharks, football guys, fantasy pros, they all put out their, their breakout picks and their bust and all that stuff. That will change ADP for the average drafter. So if you want these guys, you should try to get as much as you can now without overdoing it.
We are less than 9 minutes away from the kickoff of the FFPC Best Ball Tournament draft tonight that Terp and Theo will be participating in, sharing a team tonight, drafting from the 9 spot, and we'll have pick-by-pick coverage of how they build this team as they try to win that $300K grand prize tonight. You're watching the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network. Theo, getting back to you on partnerships and drafting with partners, right? And I know you've done it with a lot of different people. What makes a good partner? Because I think I've done this before too. I don't necessarily want to have a partner that's a yes man, but I do like having a partner that will challenge me to some degree, but not to a large degree, given you only have 60 seconds to make a pick, right? Like, what are some of the qualities that you look for and how you have been developed this chemistry that seems to be working between you and Terp?
Yeah, so I think that the number one thing is if you're going to be doing a number of FFPC teams with a partner and it's redraft, I want to trust that person that they're going to grind the waiver wire. That's like first and foremost. And also, I don't need to go back and forth with people. They should have an idea of the guys we should be adding, because if you're handling high volume, you don't have time to like go through each and every team. It's sort of like an understanding thing. when I'm splitting a team with Dan Williamson or Andrew Schellenberg or Nelson Sousa, it's kind of like hey, we're doing this, but it's not like we need to have a meeting about it. Right. Best ball is a little bit different. Best ball, like you want to be able to have very good communication skills, and I want to be able to kind of trust my partner's judgment. If you're ever not going to be able to make a draft, you want to make sure that like your money is being spent in the correct ways. And yeah, I agree with you completely. Like the last thing you want is some partner that's just continually deferring everything to you and saying, yeah, that makes sense. I just want to take that guy. I want to take that guy. I agree with you. You want to have a discourse, but at that same time, you also don't want to have like a bunch of arguments. Like if you get into a best ball draft and you're arguing on every single pick, you probably don't have the right partner. So generally, I think as long as I trust the person on structure first and foremost in best ball, where we have an idea of like what we need to do round by round to play catch up at positions, make sure we walk out of there with enough bullets in the gun, so to speak, at every spot, then I'm okay kind of like being like deferring to Terp on a pick. Maybe he defers to me on a pick. And sort of like at the end of the day, it's a team that we're both kind of happy about without sort of like kissing each other's butt on picks. I think that's a good way of kind of putting it. You can't be weak-willed when you have a partner. You've got to be able to kind of say your piece.
Right. Yeah. And that's, I've seen that before too, with, plenty of high stakes players over the years who've had really, really good partnerships that really seem to work. And the other thing too is, and I'll point this out, some of them have had bad years together, right? Where it's just like, okay, we whiffed on a lot of this stuff. Where do we go wrong? How can we avoid making these mistakes again? And then they come back the next year with a vengeance and they have a fantastic year, right? So just because you have one bad year, it doesn't necessarily make you the partnership being doomed. It's nothing like that at all. We have a few minutes here before we take our first break. I do want to get into a couple of players that you guys may or may not be targeting or fading tonight. Terp, I'll kick things off. Kyren Williams is a player that has been falling in drafts a little bit right now. I look at the mojo on this at Fantasy Mojo, fantasymojo.com. Darren Armani, the godfather, the Pros vs. Joes championship or challenge, I should say. Anytime we reference ADP, it's always coming from his website. And if you're playing in the FFPC, strongly urge you to get a subscription to Fantasy Mojo. I look at Kyren Williams right now over the last 5 days in the FFPC best ball tournament, which you guys will be drafting in tonight. He sits at the 302 as the 8th running back off the board. It wasn't too long ago. He was an early second-round pick. Now he's an early third-round pick. Is that a price that you like right now? Is it still not far enough? How are you handling Kyren Williams?
I mean, I've been a fader of Kyren Williams pretty much from the beginning. His price is getting a lot better. I mean, I will have a couple shares at, if he continues to fall. I want him to go the opposite way. I want him to go back up draft boards because he's a guy that I will not be targeting that much this year. But, I mean, if the right structure comes, I mean, the opportunity is still there. We saw what he did last year. There's obviously a lot of detriment against him. A lot of high volume guys and a lot of very smart people are not on Kyren Williams this year. And that's stuff you have to pay attention to. Mm-hmm. But he's a guy from day one that I've not been on, but his value is starting to get to a point where it might be worth the risk. I mean, just for, you saw the opportunity that he had last year in fantasy football. It's a dream spot. He pretty much played 100% of the snaps, got all the work, just didn't catch enough passes. But if that goes up, I mean, he could be a very, very good value in drafts. I'll have a couple shares, but it won't be something I'll overdo.
Theo, to talk about offenses in the NFL right now that I think we need to get right as far as fantasy goes. Like, and by get right, I mean either fading them or fading the right guys or targeting the right guys. I think Denver's kind of a polarizing one. There is just so much unknown with the wide receivers there, with number one, a new quarterback coming in, Bo Nix. But Troy Franklin, the rookie, Cortland Sutton, who I know has seemingly always been a polarizing guy for the majority of his career. You have Marvin Mims there too. There's the Mims truthers out there, and then there's other people that believe that he's just fool's gold. So you couple that with the backfield right now. You have 4 different Broncos over the last 5 days being drafted, 4 different Broncos running backs, I should say. Javonte Williams, Jaleel McLaughlin, Audric Estime, and Samaje Perine. Does one of those guys stand out among the others when you factor in draft capital as well?
I have a ton of Jaleel McLaughlin, but he's starting to steam up. It doesn't mean it's wrong now, but it's sort of like it's not as much of a cheat code when you're starting to take Jaleel next to guys like Charbonnet. Before you were getting him like super cheap.
free.
I think Jalil's interesting because, first of all, like as a general like bird's eye view, the last few years, sort of the ugly offense that no one wants to touch this time of year has actually produced some big time ADP winners. Not saying that that's going to be Denver this year, but like we had Seattle a couple years back with Geno. No one wanted to draft any of those guys. Tyler Lockett was pushed down to like wide receiver 48. DK was going in wide receiver 3 land. Ken Walker was way pushed down. Geno was a quarterback 3. And then Seattle basically, exceeded expectations. And all of those guys crushed at ADP. Last year, Tampa Bay was the same way. Godwin, Evans, Rashad White, all pushed down. And White and Evans both gave you top 6 seasons. Baker Mayfield ends up getting quarterback 11 or whatever he finished at. So I don't know if it's going to be Bo Nix, but I do think this offense could exceed expectations. Cortland Sutton's interesting because you talk about getting off to a fast start. He's at that point where until one of these wide receivers breaks through, Cortland Sutton could see a target share that's more like one of his top seasons than like previous seasons, where I think they're going to have to use Cortland Sutton. They also have question marks at tight end. So it's running back, wide receiver 2, tight end, question marks everywhere, plus the rookie quarterback. So I think it's worth taking a shot on just because of how cheap it is. But I don't think it's a team that right now you want to try to like stack and have multiple pieces on the same roster. But if it hits, it could really hit. I will say Bo Nix is always targeting his running backs. Bucky Irving led the nation in receptions by a by a college running back last year at Oregon. I do think that's like in Bo Nix's nature. The guy's a screen merchant. He likes passes around the line of scrimmage. So Jalil, if he gets that opportunity, I think he could be like this year's Jalen Warren. I think north of 60 receptions, and he'll return value, especially in best ball Terp, where you don't have to worry about when to start Jalil.
He's my number one most owned player right now.
Wow. Okay. Well, we'll be looking for that. Maybe you guys.
But he is starting to steam. You asked the question. He's a guy that's like he's starting to get a little expensive.
We will see if you guys get him tonight. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, Theo Gremminger from Player Profiler, Dave Terpoilli from the FFPC. I'm Eric Balkman from the FFPC. The live draft action starts next. Who will these guys draft at the 9 spot in the first round? We'll have that answer for you when we come back. You're watching the Better Sports Network.
Is Dynasty. And the place to play is myffpc.com. Go to myffpc, use promo code COOP. They'll give you $25 when you deposit $35 or more. Now is the time to get in there and get set up with a startup draft. Now is the time, now that the rookies and everyone are set, because you can go in and you can start the draft and, you draft your Justin Jeffersons and Jamar Chases. And now that we know where the rookies are and where they're landing, you get going on that. So you want to try and set a startup draft for this week coming up if you're not involved yet. So go get involved. Use the QR code here or use the promo code that's in the link in the description here and get yourself going on Dynasty so you can really enjoy these players and draft the players you believe in. If you like Michael Penix Jr., you got to play Dynasty because you got to wait for him, but the payoff is big. And same with like Pearsall and Jackson Smith and Jigba and all these guys. Get in and do that. And I'll tell you what, the orphan leagues over there that we've been talking about, those all got bought up. They're actually all sold. People from this show I know took over a bunch of them. So right now, startups is the way to go. That's the way to rock and roll. It is startup season. Startup season and rookie draft season. That's what's up. Get set up at myffpc.com. Use promo code COOP. They'll give you $25 when you deposit $35 or more and give you a leg up. No dealing with chasing around your friends and making them pay dues and having your buddy be like, oh, dude, I got to quit the league because I got a dog and I can't pay attention no more and I don't want to do trades. Forget all that. You can play online, MyFFPC, high stakes, low stakes, whatever you want to do with experts. And if somebody leaves the league, it goes in that orphan pool and somebody picks it up. The league has never been disbanded on FFPC.com. That's directly from Eric Balkman over there. Has told me that. So that's what's up.
Welcome back into the Fantasy Football Players Championships production of the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network. We are doing some live drafting tonight. It is Theo Gremminger from PlayerProfiler and, of course, Dave Terpoilli teaming up once again to try to win a $300,000 grand prize in the FFPC Best Ball Tournament. You can, too, when you go to myffpc.com. Click on that Best Ball Tournament link, and you can register and play along with these guys to see if you're going to be the next $300,000 champion in the FFPC Best Ball Tournament. It's a $100,000 increase over last year as well. Prizes are deeper. The action's a lot of fun. We're getting into some action tonight. You guys are almost on the clock. Matt, if we can throw up the draft board here as Theo and Dave are getting set to make their first pick. And now they are on the clock here. You can see how the first round has gone. We had Lamb and Brown go number 1, number 2. McCaffrey and Bijan Robinson, the 2 running backs off the board. And then it's been all receivers after that. Tyreek Hill, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, Amon-Ra St. Brown. I'll let you guys talk it out here. What are we doing at 109?
Terp, you already know who we're going to take here at the
Easy
109.
one here. Easy
I mean, it's
one.
a nice little gift. We get Breece Hall at the 109.
Let's do it.
So why is that? I mean, why is he? Because I've seen him slipping in drafts recently too, and I'm kind of curious as to why that is.
You see what's next to his name?
Yeah,
with that he's a running back.
No, what's next to his name?
Slight knock. It's
The
not.
Q?
There's no concern. With the Jets, at least there's no really like anything kind of leaking about any concern. I'm not concerned about it. And again,
no concern whatsoever.
Yeah, this is a guy that in our hardway draft went at the 101 to Abib Agbatoba. I also think in best ball, people think they can make up for it at running back, but taking Breece Hall allows us to be so flexible here, Terp. Like the amount of running backs we have to select, the next running back we select, like we're in really, really good shape right now.
I think I think the other interesting thing. Well, I'll say this too. Breece Hall normally has an ADP at the 106 over the last 5 days. So this is, you say bulky, that's only 3 picks. Well, 3 picks in the first round is pretty blanking significant. And like Theo says, it does allow you guys to be flexible here. The first round is over. Nakua, Garrett Wilson, and Jahmyr Gibbs end up rounding out the first round. No tight ends go in the first round here. Once again, no surprise. That seems like that has been happening quite a bit, quite significantly this year. Travis Kelce is indeed the first tight end off the board at the 201. I think that's kind of interesting that he's over Laporta. Terp, do you have a feeling on, and I don't know if you guys are thinking tight end here. I know you're on the clock, but do you have any kind of inkling if you do take a tight end, who it would be?
I think we have a good idea who it's going to be. I mean, there's
I don't think
we need. Went.
Yeah, we would have taken Sam Laporta there. Terp, I'm sort of open here. We have a couple of wide receivers in the queue.
I have a lean toward London, but it's a small lean, not anything crazy. But
I sort of like going Marvin Harrison Jr. here. You could kind of twist my arm into a tight end as well.
There's no tight end I would take over either one of these two. So if you have a little bit of a lean,
I have a slight lean to Marvin Harrison Jr. I think, for me, like I think London's fine. But Marvin Harrison Jr. I think has a little bit more of an edge.
I agree.
And we don't have to deal with a Bijan Robinson in that Arizona offense. I think when push comes to shove, the passing game is going to be massive for Arizona. Whereas Atlanta, I think there's going to be certain games if Bijan is doing his thing, they're going to really lean into him. You also, obviously there's the threat of Trey McBride in Arizona, but I think they're going to be able to coexist there because again, they're not going to have to necessarily force things with the running back. I think Bijan is going to catch a lot more passes than some people think as well. They're both good picks, though. Let's be honest. Like Drake London and Marvin Harrison Jr. were both splitting hairs. Both guys can finish inside of the top 10 wide receiver scorers this year.
Easily.
Both have upside. Both are studs. This is like, what are we arguing about? They're both fine.
No downside to either player, in my opinion, trying to get as much exposure to both, especially around this range.
Theo, when you were talking about Marvin Harrison and Drake London just now with Terp, what did you mean that Harrison has a little bit more of an edge than London does?
For me, I just, at the end of the day, Drake London is a guy that we've already seen have a 28% target share, and there was limited targets in general. I think Marvin Harrison Jr. was a better prospect coming out of college. He had higher draft capital, and I feel much more comfortable with Kyler Murray than I do with Kirk Cousins coming off of an injury. I think that I'm betting on Atlanta's offense to take a step forward, but it's year one for that regime with that offense, whereas Arizona is going to be year two. I think that Arizona offense could be the real breakout one this year, sort of in the league. I think that offense is going to be humming. I've loved to build Arizona correlation. There's other Cardinals that we could take later in this draft at multiple points in this draft, not only Kyler Murray, to kind of lean into having some Arizona exposure. I just feel super comfortable about them. Atlanta, we're betting also on extreme consolidation to kind of for all three of those guys to return value at ADP. I'm not really, I wouldn't say concerned is the right word, but I do think the Atlanta guys have gotten steamed up big time. I think Marvin Harrison deserves to be going right there. But again, like if we would have taken London instead, I'm not like crying a river. I think London is going to end up being probably right around where he's being drafted. Whereas Marvin Harrison Jr., I think, does have that next level upside. I think he's going to catch a ton of touchdowns in his rookie season.
Terp, I want to talk with you about a couple of Eagles here. The first one was, I want to say the shock of the draft, but one of the biggest surprises of the first round, A.J. Brown, who has an ADP in this competition of 112 over the last 5 days. He goes at the 102 tonight. You are the Eagles expert here. It's not like this is the only time I've seen A.J. Brown spike up in the first round like this. Why is this happening? And what did you think about that pick by Team 2?
Somebody must have been watching Theo's show the other day with Nelson Sousa. If you want to see what he said, you can tune in and watch it. But A.J. Brown, to me, is, I mean, being underdrafted. It's not a homer take. Obviously, I'm a humongous Eagles fan, but Kellen Moore, motion, I mean, everything just has the makings. You saw what A.J. Brown could do last year. Mm-hmm. He had that stretch where he literally dominated fantasy football. If Eagles didn't fall off a cliff, he could have put up record receiver numbers. But the team just, for whatever reason, just turned into a disaster, and he stopped getting the ball. His touchdowns were down. I mean, if you look at all that together with Kellen Moore, who I love the hiring, nothing negative to say about it. He's a guy with, this could be his last chance, you know, after kind of flaming out in, you know, the Chargers. I know the Herbert got hurt. You know, the team was kind of a disaster, obviously, with, you know, the horrible head coach they had. But with A.J. Brown, I mean, he is a top 3 talent in this league at the position.
I'm going to save my. Go ahead, Terp. I'm sorry.
No, you're what you're saying is number 2 overall. It's not too crazy. I mean, I've seen crazier. You know, it's above ADP. I get all that stuff, but like clearly this drafter's trying to make a statement, and he did.
And he also gets the Kincaid Allen stack here at the 211 302. So that's an interesting rainbow start there for Team 2. You guys are coming up here in the third round. I think maybe with the exception of quarterback, I don't know how you feel about it, but you guys could go a variety of different directions here, Terp. You are in the hole right now. I think there's a tight end that would make sense here. I think you could go.
No table talk yet.
I'm not. That's why I'm not mentioning. I'm not mentioning any players' names, but I'm just saying for the audience who is watching this, like there's a tight end that would make some sense here. You guys could go with a number of receivers. There's also probably some running backs out here that would make some sense too, as you are on deck here and now on the clock as the teammate just took Deebo Samuel off the board. You guys went Breece Hall, Marvin Harrison. I'll let you guys go.
We have
questions at all here.
Well, we have a discussion a little bit. I like both guys in the queue. I guess that there's a chance that there's 3 guys in the queue. I think 2 could make it back to us, and one has no chance. So maybe one of them makes it back. But let's take the guy at the top of our queue. Structurally, it makes sense, and I love the value.
He will not be drafted here when it comes to September.
He's going higher than this. He's going higher.
Kyle Pitts is, to me, like, I'm not as high on him as most, but to me, this is great value compared to where he's going and where he's going to go. So, I mean, all aboard, you know, this pick right here where we're getting him. So no downside whatsoever for me.
So I like the start, Terp, and we end up getting an Atlanta Falcon anyway, but we get him at the 309. You know, I think that's one other thing about London is if you want exposure to this Atlanta offense, you could take Pitts as well. It's sort of the argument for both of them to get a very kind of outsized target share and be towards like the league leaders in like targets at their position, and both have a chance to take big steps forward with this new regime instead of using the the 204, we end up using the 309. So that worked out really, really well. And now we are not chasing at tight end. So I love our balance here. A lot of times Terp and I would start out with 3 wide receivers, and we're totally cool doing it that way. But this way, I feel like it's going to be a lot easier to play catch up at wideout than it would be at tight end and running back. And also, just like with Breece Hall, this gives us an option of not having to overload the back half of our draft with like dart throw tight end types that we're trying to chase a week or two of production. We got a guy that, I mean, Terp, the downside for Pitts in a rational coaching staff is like tight end 10 this year. The upside is a top 3 tight end this year. So
1,000%.
It's easy game here.
I mean,
so go ahead, Terp. I'm sorry.
You pretty much said it perfectly. I mean, me and Dan Williamson, we did our best ball draft a couple weeks ago. We got boxed in at tight end, and pretty much it did exactly what Theo said. Just took 4 at the end, and you're hoping for the best. And obviously, that has paid off in the past, and we expect it to pay off again this year. There's always that Sam Laporta of last year, Evan Ingram of the year from before, but it's definitely still a little bit more a dangerous build because by the time that those guys tee off, your team could be in some hurt. With all these top tight ends, and I mean, this is the year of tight end. Last year was the year of the quarterback. This is the year of the tight end, and things are going very well in this draft so far.
Now, Terp, I got to put you on the spot. Who do you like drafting with more, Dan Williamson or me?
Well, that's easy. It's definitely you.
Oh, there you go, Dan.
I love Dan, and me and Dan have gone back and forth and had some good battles over the years. We don't see this year. We saw eye to eye on a lot of our picks, but we see a lot more eye to eye on player takes and things like that. Which we also see. Dalton Kincaid. I know you love. That was
Terp. That just killed us.
Yeah, that was a bummer.
That almost made it right back to us. Okay, so we're OTC. We're sort of wide open with this one, Terp. I really was hoping one of those 2 guys fell back to us.
One of those 3 guys I would have been happy with.
Yeah. Where are you at on this one, Terp? I'm sort of wide open here. I think structurally we could end tight end here with one guy. I'm okay going to the running back or wide receiver well. I don't really see the need to go QB unless you're feeling it.
I see no QB here. To
so
me,
ignore QB.
Yeah, QB is ignored. To me, it would be one of those 2, but I would probably lean toward one. End the position.
Yeah.
Make everybody else scramble.
Let's go with it. Number 1 is good.
Let's do it.
I had a feeling it was going to be Ingram there when you guys were talking about tight end.
And now we could potentially be done at the tight end spot. I have to double check the bye weeks though, Terp.
Let's check.
I believe they are both on week 12 buys. Pitts and Ingram.
Okay, so we're not done at tight end, but at the end of the day, we still have a huge edge.
That's a good predicament to have.
Yeah, honestly, the whole idea, like Evan Ingram, this is a guy that I think is going to be going higher and higher. Like Nelson Sousa is big on him. I'm big on him. Everybody I'm talking to is big on Evan Ingram. And it's sort of like there's this disconnect between you're starting to see Evan Ingram go a little bit closer to like the big 6 tight ends.
Yeah.
But oftentimes, like especially on like Underdog and on other non-tight end premium formats, Ingram's just not treated with the same light. And it's like, what are we trying to see here? The thing about Evan Ingram is they have 2 new wide receivers in Jacksonville. And I'm a Brian Thomas Jr. guy. I like him. But at the end of the day, it's like Calvin Ridley had nearly 140 targets last year. I think it's kind of a big stretch to say that Thomas Jr. is going to have anywhere near that sort of target share. And Christian Kirk comes back, but we've already seen Christian Kirk as sort of a cap ceiling guy. He had the wide receiver 1 season, but he's never had like that crazy target year. Evan Ingram has been so good with Trevor Lawrence. And last year he ends up leading all tight ends in targets, 2nd most receptions all time at the tight end position. And it's like people don't even kind of think about that. It's wild. He's like Jarvis Landry stats, but playing tight end. And in tight end premium, Evan Ingram is like a cheat code right now.
In my opinion, he probably had the quietest 100+ catch season last year in fantasy football history. I mean, people are starting to talk about Evan Ingram more because you're starting to look at the stats from last year and starting to get more information of, guys when you're starting to draft. But like for a while, it was like everybody talked about Kincaid. Everybody talked about Andrews. Everybody talked about McBride. Pitts, obviously, with the quarterback upgrade. Laporta, Kelsey. And Evan Ingram was kind of ignored. And he was early on he was going so late, and I'm just sitting here going like, did I not see his stats? Are they wrong? Like, what's going on?
The chat, I'll give your chat, like, Balkman, every time I tune into your shows, like, the guys in your chat are guys that I've drafted against and played against, and like very smart FFPC managers. And I think like Henry Muto makes a really good point that like the edge was bigger with Evan Engram last year in round 7 than it's going to be this year. And I completely agree with Henry there. But for us, it's like a structural play as well, where we were in a flat tier. I think where we were drafting, we had Travis Etienne, we had Malik Neighbors in the queue. Those guys go bang, bang. And instead of trying to like make up for it at another position, we're able to kind of get our tight end too. And agreed on the sort of the edge here. Like when you're drafting Evan Engram at tight end 6 overall, it's kind of less impactful than when you're getting him at like tight end 10 and a couple rounds later. But at the end of the day, I think structure still matters. And now being able to kind of almost ignore tight end except for one more pick and being able to do that late because we're really only worried about week 12 gives us a really, I think, a structural lean. And then there was one other good point in your chat about how his production went way up when Christian Kirk went out. But I think that the X factor there is Christian Kirk went out, Ridley's production also went up. Now it's Ridley's gone as well. So I think at the end of the day, the one real constant in Jacksonville is Evan Engram. Kirk is going to step into a nice season. I think Kirk's fine. But Evan Engram, I think there's some upside there. I also think what's funny about Ridley led the NFL in end zone targets last year. And Engram, I don't want to use the word because, like, I'm not that dude, Terp, but positive touchdown regression. You hear that all the time this year.
100%.
Like, he's due for a 8 touchdown season. For a guy who catches that many balls with that athleticism, that's not like a massive leap for him to have that for us this year.
You know, to your guys' point about, kind of pushing the tight end position, I don't want to say that correlation equals causation here, if I'm using that term correctly. But you guys take Evan Engram at the 404, and then look what happens. George Kittle goes about a full half round before he normally goes. Jake Ferguson, same thing, about a full half round. And then you have Team 2 going with Brock Bowers here to make it 3 tight ends on that squad within the first 5 picks. I think that's kind of overkill, Terp, but how do you think it's going to affect the rest of the drafters now?
I mean, for us, we're very excited about it. I mean, right. we took the last guy in my opinion, I know Theo's opinion, the tier. I mean, Kittle, yeah. Ferguson, Bowers. I think there's a drop off after Engram, and all those guys are a little bit of reach. I mean, Team 2 is clearly trying to build a wacky draft. I mean, no running backs, 3 tight ends, a quarterback already, and obviously AJ Brown number 2. Trying to make a statement. I don't know if that's going to be pan out well for them. I think they're reaching a lot, but that's going to have guys that are going to fall to us. And right now, a bunch of them are falling that I know both of us like a lot.
Yeah, we have a couple of nice options. I like who you have queued up. That would make sense. We'll see if he lasts to there. I think quarterback in this range is also interesting.
Well, I think when you look at, and by the way, Terp and Theo are now on the clock here. I'll let you guys take it away and let you talk out your 509 pick here.
Well, I'm totally on board with George Pickens here, Terp, and I don't even mind table talking because I think we should just take him.
I agree. I mean, I think running the receiver is going to start coming soon. I think there's a very small chance the other guy makes it back. So
yeah, I agree with you.
Here.
Yeah, so and I kind of forced our pick there with the table talk too because I know there's
he was never coming back, so it wasn't. I don't worry about that stuff as much as some people do.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the George Pickens is obviously the pick here at 509, 20th receiver off the board. Terp, this is a player that is not going to have to battle with Deontay Johnson for targets this year. He will have Roman Wilson, and I know was it Calvin Austin that got that recent blurb. I think from a Pittsburgh beat writer saying that if there's another receiver on this team besides Pickens that's going to make a dent, it'd be him. But Pickens this year without Johnson is very intriguing for fantasy purposes. No.
Well, there's never been.
I mean, he's pretty much the only guy there. I mean, the name we love to mention on these shows that literally torture us, Arthur Smith's still there, so that's a worry. But outside of him, George Pickens is a dog. I mean, he's one of the talented, the guys out there that in best ball you love because he can put up that monster win to get you $300,000 at the end. There's not many guys that are drafted down this range where you're like, wow, this guy can win it for me. He's a guy that could have that explosive 30 to 40 point week. He catches, a lot of long touchdowns. And if he figures out the small, things in his game, Pickens could be a top 10 receiver this year very easily. So a pick that we both agreed on and pretty easily. And I mean, the only thing that worries me there is one thing and one thing only, and that's Arthur Smith.
Which is not something like completely you can ignore with George Pickens.
No.
Like Arthur Smith has never had a wide receiver have more than, I believe it was 117 targets in any season. And that's including AJ Brown. So like Arthur Smith has a really poor track record of peppering alphas with targets. That being said, I think George Pickens could do a lot with 125 targets, especially when you have Russell Wilson behind center. Like Russell Wilson will force it downfield when he needs to. I think it's also sort of a prove it season for Russell Wilson. He's going to have an edge to him. There's, of course, Justin Fields behind him, but there's sort of a renewed energy with Russell Wilson. And like we like Roman Wilson at Player Profiler. And I'm a Muth guy. Like I'm never going to quit Muth completely. But at the end of the day, like if you look at that roster, getting George Pickens the ball and featuring him in the offensive game plan, that has to be a weekly occurrence for Pittsburgh if they're going to take that next step. And I also think their division is going to be a little more shootout friendly than in most seasons. Like those AFC North offenses are all looking like pretty strong. You have what's going on in Baltimore with Todd Monken. You have Cleveland making the offense coordinator switch. I think Ken Dorsey is going to be super aggressive this year. So a lot of positives there with Pickens. And that being said, you get him. We're basically getting him at cost, Terp. So it's not like we reach for him.
You guys are once again on deck here to recap the team. Breece Hall is the lone running back so far as we are approaching the 604 pick for Terp and Theo here. Marvin Harrison, George Pickens are the receivers, and you do have a couple of tight ends on your team in Kyle Pitts and Evan Engram. There are 5 quarterbacks off the board so far. Since Brock Bowers was the 3rd tight end selected by Team 2 as tight end 10 in this draft, no tight ends have gone off the board either. We have 16 backs and 31 receivers gone here as you guys are now on the clock once again at the 604.
Another great spot. 2 guys we can talk about because they're not making it back to us.
Yeah, I mean, Terp, I'm okay going with the 3rd tight end because I really like David Njoku this year, especially in this range. I think there would be somewhat unique build as well with those 3. We're not checking like the Mojo Stack Hunter or anything like that.
No.
But I'm okay with F1 as well. I think F1 especially structurally makes sense to us. Both guys we can build correlation with. I'm going to sort of defer to you. I think they're both fine values here in the middle of the 6.
I mean, this is a little bit tough because I'm leaning 2, but I also see what you're saying about 1 because nobody's going to have that same build.
Nobody's going to have
a wacky build to where we're like too far off the radar where it's like, all right, you're just getting too crazy. Like nobody is probably going to have this build. So let's
do it. Let's get a little bit unique.
And the 3rd tight end for the OG Terp is David Njoku at the 604. I think that's interesting too, guys, because in a draft where, you guys kind of pushed up tight end a little bit, you still get Njoku almost at cost here, Theo.
Yeah, I like where we got Njoku, and I think it's sort of a lot of people are betting on Njoku to like kind of lose what he had with Flacco and take a big step back. And certainly I think he was so good at the end of the year last year. They were really leaning on him. We talked about Evan Engram, how he ended last season so well. But Njoku is 28 years old. This is not like some old man. And this is also, again, they bring in Ken Dorsey, who I think is going to be Ken Dorsey pushed out of Buffalo, gets another shot with Cleveland. I think he's going to be very aggressive, and I think they're going to take some shots. To think that they can't change their usage on David Njoku with Deshaun Watson back, it's kind of weird to me that people think that NFL teams can't self-scout and can't look at what was working to end last year and keep it going. So one thing I think that's not going to disappear on this offense is I do think we'll still see some of those tight end screens that David Njoku was eating on with Alex Van Pelt. I think that's something we'll still see just because he was so effective with it. But that being said, like, I think if we weren't trying to, I think being unique, like they're having a unique build and doing it with like a sort of our 6th round pick. I really like F1 Terry McLaurin, but at the end of the day, we can make up for wide receiver a little bit more with volume. And Njoku could be a difference maker at the tight end position. We already saw his ability to put up big FFPC spike weeks. So I like what we did there, Terp. I think like if you told me this was going to be our start this morning from the 9 hole, I would have been really happy with it.
I would have been thrilled because I never thought Hall would make it to us. I mean, we didn't really even talk about the 9th pick because there's nothing you really can talk about. You're hoping, some of these top guys fall, which they did with Hall. Marvin Harrison, Drake London, we got one of the guys there. And Kyle Pitts, let's just talk about it. We never thought he was coming here. We talked about him on the show before this draft started. Kyle Pitts is getting steamed up at the beginning of the 3rd round. By the time we all draft in Vegas, he's going to be at the end of the 2nd round. There's no doubt whatsoever in my mind. So getting those 3 players, Ingram and Njoku, and the good thing is for people that don't know, in the FFPC format, 3 tight ends can start. I know people might look at this board and be like, what the heck do you idiots take 3 tight ends for? Well, that's a fair thing to look at because it's a little weird. But all 3 tight ends can play, and they all have massive output potential. I mean, you saw Njoku at the end of the season last year. Obviously, Kyle Pitts and Evan Ingram. I mean, there's so much potential there to put up a ton of points. And that doesn't even include the other 3 picks who we like a lot.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, I think like with our build, like I'm more apt to kind of lean into tight end when we have a running back that we think can finish as running back 1 overall and a wide receiver who I think can give us top 5 wide receiver production in Marvin Harrison Jr. So I like what we did, and I think that those 3 tight ends are going to be in play a lot more than people think. They all have sort of ups. Well, Evan Ingram, not necessarily like a massive upside swing compared to like Pitts in the 3rd and Njoku in the 6th. But I love the structure that we have. And also we have potential correlation with multiple guys now, Terp.
1,000%. We have a lot of guys that are coming up that are guys we're going to consider that correlate perfect. We always like the week 17 stuff that always, the best ball bros like to bring that up as something that's very important. I think it's important. I think it's a little bit overdone, but more of in a bigger format than this, but running back run. Interesting.
Guys, what I want to do is I want to step out, take a quick break. When we come back, you guys are going to make your 709 pick. I also just noticed an interesting trend with your team, too, that I want to bring up. Theo, Gremminger, and Dave Terpoilli joining me, Eric Balkman, on the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network. Live draft coverage continues right after this.
With Dynasty is that it's so hard to get a good league going. Like, it's very difficult to get all these friends that are going to be paying attention, or they're going to stick with it, and they're not going to say, oh, I don't want to play anymore. My team stinks. Find somebody else next year. Like, and then you're collecting dues, and then you're getting in arguments, and you're arguing with people on Twitter about dues. Like, we've seen too much of that going on. So it's very difficult. And what happens is you find like 5 or 6 good people that want to play, and then you don't have enough people, and you fill the league with a bunch of weirdos. So what I like doing, honestly, at this stage is if I'm going to play Dynasty, I want to play on a nice, clean, serious, professional site, and I go to FFPC to play, right? FFPC has never had a league fold. Eric Balkman over there told me that. He's like, if somebody has to leave a league, we just fill it. So your option is you can go and do a startup, and like Jack said in the chat, you start it, and then you go and you figure out who you're going to take from the top down. And if you want to do like a long rebuild, or a long-term team, or if you want to try and win right away and get a bunch of vets, you can do that. Or you can adopt an orphan team, and with that you go out and somebody quit, and that's so much fun, because then you take their team and you have all these guys that you like, but then you have all of these guys that they had that you don't like, and that's actually way more fun, because then you can trade all those guys, and it's so much fun to trade. Like when I go to orphan teams, I used to say, oh, I'm not going to take this team because all the players, I don't like them. I only want players I do like. But I've realized that it's actually more fun to should take the teams that have a couple guys you really like and a couple guys that everyone else likes that you don't like, and then trade them. Like go and grab an orphan team like Gabe Davis and trade him to some Gabe Davis guy. So go do that now. Use the you can use the QR code here or a link in the description, or go to myffpc.com. Just make sure you use promo code COOP when you get set up. They'll give you $25 when you deposit 35 or more. And that's another thing. When you make a league with your friends, Coop isn't giving you $25, right? You have to pay the full dues. This time you get a little discount. So yeah, go over there. And also for you maniacs out there, they do have high stakes leagues. So these leagues, if you want, you can go big time. I know some of the redraft leagues. We announced on this channel a redraft league that 10K buy-in. I'm not sure the dynasty ones go that high, but they go into the thousands. So if you want to take this real seriously and get crazy with it, do it. That's the place to do it. myffpc.com, promo code COOP, baby. Go get set up.
The draft continues on here with the FFPC Best Ball Tournament. Also want to tell you about the Fantasy Pros Championship. You just saw that graphic there. If you want to learn more, scan that QR code on your screen right now. It'll take you right to where you need to go. A $1 million grand prize at stake there in a $6 million prize pool. Drafts filling daily. Check that out at myffpc.com. myffpc.com is where to go for that, for the Fantasy Pros Championship in 2024. I'm here live with player profilers Theo Gremminger and, of course, Dave Terpoilli. They have teamed up on an FFPC Best Ball Tournament team that they are drafting. We are in the 8th round right now. Terp and Theo just took Kyler Murray at the 709. They are now on the clock in the 8th round. Nice little pairing there with Kyler Murray and their 2nd round pick, Marvin Harrison. 3 tight ends already on the team, only 1 running back, only 2 wide receivers. I don't know if they're going to attack the position here, but I'll kind of let you guys go back and forth a little bit as you are now on deck for your 8th round pick, and then we'll talk a little bit about Kyler Murray afterwards.
Yeah, so I think it's structural. I like where your head's at on the one player, but I think it's a little bit overkill, even though he makes sense value wise.
Agree.
It would be a very unique build, but we sort of need
people will be talking. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, I don't know if I want to get that reputation.
I don't know either.
Yeah, we're not like that. We're done there. I think we're done at that spot. So we're going to take him out of the equation. So to me, I think this is it's very much a young versus old argument here. I like the idea of Jonathan Brooks here as our RB2. I think he's going to catch a lot of passes when he's on the field. At the end of the day, though, I think leaning into one of those 2 wide receivers makes the most sense structurally for us. And we sort of try to play a little bit of catch up at wideout. Do you have a lean towards running back versus wideout right here? Because, again, I do like Brooks here.
I like Brooks, but my lean is toward a receiver.
Okay,
I feel
so
like we have some correlation with Ingram and Hopkins.
So your call on which wide receiver. Let's go Hopkins. I like where you're at with the other one, but yeah, I think Hopkins right now, it's sort of you're getting him as the wide receiver 2 on Tennessee, and I'm not so sure that a healthy DeAndre Hopkins is not still going to be their wide receiver 1, despite Calvin Ridley signing the mega contract. Like D-Hop's played well last year, and
Calvin Ridley was not good last year.
Yeah, Calvin Ridley was not good, but again, like targets are earned. He got a ton of them, and Tennessee signed him, I think, to do the same thing with him. 100%. But at the end of the day, like I'll take the discount D-Hops over having to pay any increased price on like a Ridley right now. D-Hops is one where I've been recommending him to dynasty managers. If you're looking for like a mercenary that you can get for super cheap right now, plug in your lineup all season long. You're not worried about the future. You're worried about this year type player. He's so cheap in every single format. He's the kind of guy that I think could beat expectations in literally every format this year if that passing volume is where we think it's going to be. I don't really see Tyler Boyd or Chigakonkwo as a real threat to do anything weekly. I know there's a little bit of buzz on like Okonkwo and Josh Wiley from the coaching staff and the beat reporters, but at the end of the day, I think it's going to be a consolidated receiver target tree with Pollard and Spears getting a lot of targets out of the backfield. And I'll take 8th round D-Hops all day long.
I wanted to ask you about this Kyler Murray pick here, Terp. I was wondering if you guys were going to look at CJ Stroud, because I think you could have looked at him at either your 5th round pick or your 6th round pick. You chose Pickens and Njoku there. Was that because of the potential other quarterbacks that would pair up with some of the other guys on your roster?
It definitely was. Stroud, to me, the only reason you're drafting Stroud in best ball, not that he's not a very good quarterback and that offense is going to be very good, is when you get one of those receivers. Naked Stroud just doesn't make any sense because you're going to be competing against. He offers no rushing upside. That's pretty much been proven. It obviously could improve, but I doubt it. But if you're going after some of these teams in a shootout and CJ Stroud goes off and you have him naked, chances are you're not going to win because one of those guys, whether it's Diggs, whether it's Collins, whether it's Dell, are 99% of the time going to be on the team. Yeah, you might get lucky with a Dalton Schultz build, but that you're looking at a 1%er right there. So to me, Stroud, best ball, it's if you draft Dell, if you draft Diggs, if you draft Collins, like Stroud, don't love them. But that's where we pretty much stood there.
One of the things I said before we took a break is the fact that I noticed the trend with your first few picks tonight, Theo. Breece Hall, Marvin Harrison, Kyle Pitts, George Pickens, 4 of your first 5 picks. I think the one thing that they all have in common, if not the only thing they all have in common, they're all pretty young. They all have untapped upside. Do you feel like that is the way to go in these best ball drafts, that you want to get these younger, explosive, quote unquote, unknown players at the top of your draft? Or was it just coincidence how it worked out that way?
I think it's coincidence to an extent. I think I'm always trying to be a year early on guys. Not necessarily with these guys. These guys are already steamed up, but I do think that betting on sort of the unknown upside, betting on guys being able to exceed expectations and not be a wait and see it drafter. Like I think wait and see it drafters are usually dead in the water to an extent. And I think but I'm at the same time not afraid to dive into older veteran values that are kind of seem like dusty. Like I think a lot of people, like if you look at the wide receivers surrounding DeAndre Hopkins, they're all much, much younger guys with, a lot of rookies going in his range. Whereas I don't mind attacking D-Hops in that range. So I don't want to be dogmatic or have specific rules, but there's, I think when you're able to draft a guy with the idea that he could get drafted earlier the next year, you're going to end up liking a lot of your builds and a lot of your seasons more so than taking a guy that you think, hey, he could regress, but it still makes sense to take him here kind of guy.
We are coming up on your 9th round pick. You guys are up now on the clock here. I'll let you guys talk it over here. What are you thinking here at 9:09?
Well, I like who we have at number 1 in the queue, Terp. I do think that is there a chance he comes back?
I think there's a chance he comes back. To me, the lean is number 2 because he's not coming back.
So, yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, number 2, I think, gives us a lot of flexibility and a lot of upside.
I agree. And we pretty much could probably close the position.
I think we're done at that spot if we do it. So, let's just take him.
The pick is in. It is Washington Commanders rookie quarterback Jaden Daniels to go with Kyler Murray. And Terp, Theo, it sounds like you guys are now done at the position. Good enough with Murray and Daniels with different bye weeks?
Yeah, I think we're good at the position. I think both of those guys legitimately have extremely high upsides. Jaden Daniels, I think, could rush for over 1,000 yards this year, which is, probably a lofty expectations to put on a rookie, but he is electric. And I think that offense, there's nothing but kind of positive vibes coming out of Washington right now with him. I like the fit with him and Cliff. Cliff is a guy that nobody's going to bet on and say he's some sort of genius, but he didn't hold back Kyler Murray from being a very effective fantasy football player. And when it comes down to it, I don't think there's a need to take a third quarterback unless we see some really, really good value in the second half of the draft. So I think it gives us a little more wiggle room. We obviously have to make up for it at wide receiver and running back now. But I do like a couple guys in our queue.
Terp, Theo just mentioned it, one running back on the squad right now. Have you guys ever had drafted a best ball team like this where you are so thin at running back essentially halfway through the draft?
No, it's definitely, something that's different. But when you start off Breece Hall, and we didn't expect to get Breece Hall, I mean, we expect Breece Hall to be a top 3 fantasy player and, at the position, which where he's being drafted. So if that all works out and he does exactly what he did at the end of the season, we could easily fill in the RB2 blanks with, depth and obviously volume. There's plenty of guys that are left on the board that are going to be very, very, good for us at both positions where, most people are stacking up on. But with the quarterback being pretty much locked and tight end being locked, I mean, we have so many avenues here to take, running backs and receivers the rest of the way that most of these teams are going to be panicking a little bit more with tight ends. I mean, one team has TJ Hawkinson as their starting tight end right now. I know it's best ball. One team does not have a tight end right now. Two teams don't have tight ends right now. I mean, they're going to have to panic it and get more volume. And when they're doing that, we're going to be, getting all the running back and receiver value that falls to us.
We're going to have to make up for it at running back a little bit more with volume than I would like. But at the end of the day, it's a champagne problem. I'll say that, taking those 3 tight ends, if you go that much of an aggressive tight end build and you're that kind of bully tight end, then you're going to let one position kind of slip. And in this case, it was running back for us, which I'm not like worried about it, Terp. I think we can make up for it.
I'm always okay with letting the running back position fall.
Yeah.
I mean, you've seen over the years, it just comes down to looking at, some of these rosters that win. Look at all the Christian McCaffrey teams last year. Most of them were led by Christian McCaffrey being a star.
That was a tough one. And I love how they waited till 10 seconds to do it too, just to stick it to us. That would have been a really nice correlation play.
Twisting the knife, Theo. That was the knife twist.
I think at the end of the day, this is number 1 in our queue.
Like
the number 2 and number 3 just don't have that same edge. Let's take them. We'll take Chase Brown as our RB2. I mean, we're betting on Chase Brown taking a big step forward. The guy he profiles as a big time pass catcher. It's sort of a split with him and Zach Moss, but we don't need him to be a weekly
He's just
starter.
a better player.
Yeah. We don't need a weekly starter here.
No.
We need him to have usable weeks and a fair amount of them. And with his receiving upside in that offense, I think that we'll get that. He hit the second highest miles per hour of any player in the NFL last year on that sort of catch and run. The sample size is small, but they didn't draft anybody. And the only running back they signed is Zach Moss, who I'm not anti-Zach Moss. But to think that Zach Moss is going to come in and be Joe Mixon is a big reach. I think Chase Brown, at the very least, is going to be used as a receiver this year.
It's definitely Chase Brown versus, over Zach Moss for me.
Yeah, and that's a lot of sharp people are with you, Terp. And I think that's sort of where I'm at, especially with the ADP cost. I can see a scenario where Zach Moss falls in the end zone a lot. I think that's sort of the out for Moss. But at the end of the day, like Moss has never had a 30 catch season in his career. Chase Brown could roll out of bed and have 30 catches by like week 9. And at the end of the day, I think that the fact that they didn't take anybody in the draft says that they at least trust Chase Brown to be a weekly target in the passing game and sort of a change of pace back. And if anything happened to Moss, I think it's Chase Brown to the moon. Like Chase Brown's a top 15 play every week. And maybe Zach Moss is just sort of a empty calories between the tackles, Alexander Madison type, and Brown is the guy with the juice next year in the backfield. I don't think it's settled though. Like I want to take a little bit more of a neutral approach. Like I'm not anti Zach Moss, but again, I like the pathway more for the younger, faster, better pass catching back.
Yeah, I'm definitely not anti Zach Moss in best ball. See, redraft, I probably lean a little bit more toward Browns. I just like the player better.
Yeah.
I could also see exactly what you said with Moss just falling in the end zone, just like Joe Mixon did.
I love where your head's at with this queue. I got to say, Terp, your queue, it's beautiful right now. You just loaded up a couple guys. I don't have a problem with any of them.
I like every single one of them.
I love a couple of those guys too. I'm getting typecasted on one of them.
Yeah. Number 2 is probably my favorite rookie. I just wish he'd landed in a little bit better of a spot.
Stud though, absolute stud.
I agree.
Theo, let me ask you, Chase Brown may or may not be the starter in Cincinnati. I think we can agree that he probably won't be, at least to start the season. But you had the starter in Denver and Javonte Williams there. Can you tell us a little bit about why Brown you felt was the better pick there over a starting running back in Denver?
I'm not into Javonte. I think Javonte at the end of the day, he averaged 3.5 yards per carry. And I think people are constantly doing mental gymnastics with trying to create this picture where Javonte is going to come back to where he was before all the injuries. I'm just not on Javonte. I think Javonte is a purgatory player. I think we could have maybe gotten a little bit of extra volume at the beginning of the year. But for me, I'd rather take shots on other Denver Broncos in the second half of the draft than have to take Javonte, who's kind of a purgatory guy to me at this range. Maybe I'm wrong on Javonte, but I don't see being light on Javonte as something that's going to burn me in any format this year. It's sort of like Najee, Javonte. Like, I don't really lean into those guys in this sort of format. I want a little bit more upside, a little more juice than just hoping Javonte is like this high volume guy.
Theo and Terp now once again on the clock here for their pick. 11:09 here. I'll let you guys talk it out. What are you thinking?
Well, I think it's a no-brainer, Terp, who we've got to take here.
1,000%. Bulky, you'll like this pick.
That's our guy. That's our guy.
There you go. I do like the pick. I like the player, MarShawn Lloyd.
I take him in every draft. It's like
it's hard not to.
I took him in every dynasty league. I talked about him on every podcast. It's sort of like people say I talk about the same guys every podcast now, but I can't stop talking about MarShawn Lloyd. He's like a must-draft guy. We're betting on the offense being an ascending offense. They will be better offense this year with Jordan Love behind center. The receiving core is a lot older. Luke Musgrave's healthy. And they always work in two running backs. We just don't always notice it as fantasy managers because A.J. Dillon is never productive with it. MarShawn Lloyd also can catch the football at the Senior Bowl, incredibly productive. This is a 225-pounder with wheels. I like everything about MarShawn Lloyd in all formats. And I think a year from now, if things bounce his way, we talk about being a year ahead of guys. A year from now, MarShawn Lloyd could be a third rounder in this tournament.
Yeah, 100% he could be. And I will say, too, with some of the a significant amount of the beat writers in Green Bay, beat writers that have seen players in shirts and shorts and, not real football. And they've seen Aaron Jones, a speedy guy, over the course of the last 6-7 years or whatever it was. They were pretty much wowed. A lot of them were wowed by how fast MarShawn Lloyd looked out there. And that speed is not necessarily an element that has been at the forefront of the Green Bay backfield. And to get a guy like that at the 11:09, I think you're doing things right here. You guys are now coming up. You're in the hole. So right now, just to recap the team for Theo and Terp here, from the 9 spot, they do have Kyler Murray and Jaden Daniels as their quarterbacks. The backfield is now at least the running back room is starting to fill up. Breece Hall is now being joined by Chase Brown and MarShawn Lloyd. Marvin Harrison, George Pickens, DeAndre Hopkins are the receivers, and they are fully loaded and stocked, ready to go at the tight end position. Kyle Pitts, Evan Engram, and David Njoku. And I think one of the other things here, Terp, is that based on how you guys have assembled this team, I know you have some work to do at running back and receiver, but you also have the flexibility to pick up some value now, basically every pick of the way, the rest of the draft, given your quarterback and tight end situation.
100%. It gives us plenty of options to see what falls. And there's plenty of guys that have fell to us that probably shouldn't have because guys are looking elsewhere, being behind the 8 ball at certain positions. So far, so good. I mean, we have a pick coming up here soon. We might, get a little dangerous with. But
are you guys zeroed in on a player right now?
No, I like several guys in our queue.
There's a bunch of guys in our queue right now, but there's one I like a little bit more than the other. We'll just see.
Yeah, we'll see. I think that the few of these guys are fine. And structurally they make sense for us. Okay, so we can talk this one out, Terp. Which way are you leaning? You can say the number if you want.
My lean is 2.
I like 2 as well. I think he sort of has some upside.
We saw it at the end of the season last year, and obviously, with Aaron Jones ahead of him, he's not coming back though, so we can talk about it.
Yeah,
with Aaron Jones being ahead of him.
Lock it in, Terp.
Excellent.
Yeah, so I think there's Aaron Jones obviously was incredible in the NFL playoffs, but he's a 29-year-old who played 12 games last year.
Yep.
And Ty Chandler has a familiarity with this coaching staff and was really good down the stretch.
Really good.
I think this is a little bit more of a, you could call it a 60-40, but Jones is not a guy who's going to come in and be a volume, monster. He's used to being a back in a backfield where a second back is sort of worked in on touches. Ty Chandler can catch the football. He's a two-way back. He's not super young for a third-year back, but he was a guy that took a big step forward last year and had that 1 week in the fantasy playoffs where he was just terrific, and a couple other weeks where he was solid. So I've been talking about Ty Chandler. I know that Billy Muzio likes him as well, my co-host from First Class Fantasy. Like Ty Chandler's he goes in this range for a reason. He's got weekly viability in best ball because he's going to have a couple games where even with Jones healthy, he's just going to catch enough passes, maybe break off a long run or two. But then if Jones goes down, he's going to be very, very, very helpful to us.
1,000%.
Yeah, and it's amazing what a few picks would do, because I know you guys waited until round 10, 11, and 12 to take your 2, 3, and 4 running backs. But I don't want to say the value got there, but the story you could tell yourself with Brown, Lloyd, and Chandler, that could be really, really significant as far as how good these guys do this year, given if the right situation develops. And you don't need them to go off every single week. Like we always talk about windows and pockets, right? And maybe there's a pocket where MarShawn Lloyd is the starter for 2 or 3 weeks, or maybe Ty Chandler is sort of splitting time all year with Aaron Jones. To your point, Theo, the Packers backfield has typically been the starter gets 2 series, and then the backup comes in for a series, then the starter for 2 series, and then the backup for another series. So they do get a lot of playing time in Green Bay. And I think as long as Lloyd is out there and he's not going to get his quarterback killed, that's going to come back, for 2024 as well. I expect that's how those guys will be operating. So I really think it was a really good job there by you, the both of you, to try to get the running back room filled up. I was going to ask you, Terp, coming into before or right after that MarShawn Lloyd pick, what was more concerning to you, only having 3 receivers or only having 3 running backs? Now you have 4 running backs.
It would probably be leaning toward the receivers. I mean, I love our receivers. I'm higher on Hopkins than most. But like I said before, with this format, 3 receivers and doesn't really hurt you as much as you think. Obviously, we're going to need to draft a ton of them coming in. There's plenty of different options that fit our build. But with the 3 tight ends, we're banking on those 3 guys to be weekly 2 out of 3 almost every week in our flex spots. So I'm not that worried about the receivers. Obviously, we're going to have to take a bunch of them coming in, and hopefully they correlate a little bit with our team build. But there's plenty of guys that are coming up here very soon that I know we both like and present plenty of upside.
Yeah, and even at the end game wide receiver options, if you're going to be throwing darts in round 19 and round 20, I'm always most comfortable throwing wide receiver darts, Terp.
Oh, 1,000%. Running back gets real dark coming up here soon.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, yeah, there's some guys that, you're going to like, but you're not going to love. I mean, it's starting to get pretty dark at the position. So to get what we got, obviously just having Hall and waiting almost 10 rounds to pick another one, I'm very happy with the running back room. That's a room that I would take in pretty much any format, to be honest with you.
I like where you're at with this queue coming up. I think sort of all of them make sense. We got 5 guys in the queue, so we've got to survive like 2 picks right here. And if you look at it, I think you're going to start seeing some quarterbacks get cleaned up, which is going to help us a lot. And I think you're starting to get to like the kind of the area where tight end
still 2 teams without tight ends.
Yeah, you're going to see some tight end cleanup here. Because I know I don't mind table talking. We're not going to take them. But like Ben Sinnott is really interesting here. Isaiah Likely is very interesting here. So I think both those guys should go very shortly.
It's the anti-table talk where you're trying to get these players off the board, right? Trying to get these other.
Please take Jerry Jeudy. Jerry Jeudy would be a guy that I would love for you guys to take. We really want him bad.
I think Mike Shope was talking about this on the deep end the other day about how I think he was referencing Chad Schroeder when you talk about in best ball, or maybe managed leagues, not so much best ball. But you don't want to get caught in the run. Like you want to make sure that you're not boxed out of any position, right? Especially in best ball. And I think there are 2 ways of operating, right? The several teams in this draft decided, okay, those guys are going to push tight ends up. I got to make sure I got to get a tight end. And then other teams are like, to hell with it. I'll grab my tight ends when I'm damn well and ready. And one guy who took Hawkinson here at the 808. How would you guys attack this draft if you were not the team with the 3 tight ends? If you were the team that was sort of had to scramble, how would you have attacked that? Theo, I'll throw it to actually. Let's answer that question a little bit. You guys are on the clock now.
Yeah, let's get this one in.
To me, it's 1, right?
Yeah, I think it has to be 1. The other 2 are super enticing, but based on the correlation,
I think they both come back, or at least one comes back.
I was going to ask you guys about that when you took Daniels, because I think what Daniels does for you at the 909, it does allow you, and I know you probably weren't going to take Ben Sinnott, but it allows you for some of these other players that don't typically go in the top half of the draft, that you can go ahead and get some correlation, that you can get some, cheap stackage here, which is what you did with Dotson. So that pick doesn't surprise me at all, and it makes perfect sense to pair him with Jaden Daniels. And certainly there's an opportunity to maybe do it more so with your quarterbacks. I don't know how you're going to attack it. I don't know how the draft is going to fall either. Jerry Jeudy did go off the board there, Terp. So good on you, my friend.
It's what we're here for. We're trying to put guys up there that we don't want at all. I mean, I've been on the Jerry Jeudy bandwagon for a long time, but that crashed and burned last year, and I don't know if I'll ever get back, because I just don't know if he loves football. And watching him run routes and just that whole Steve Smith debacle, I mean, it's hard to get excited about a player like that, especially a player that now has Njoku, Cooper, Elijah Moore. I mean, he's competing for targets with a quarterback that we don't even know if he's healthy. So, yeah, somebody else can take Jerry Jeudy this year. If he beats me, he beats me.
Yeah, Browns are cheap here. Deshaun Watson going off the board. You guys are on the clock again here at the 14:04.
Yeah, so Terp, this is an interesting one because I like 4 and I added 5 in the queue. I still think it's probably 1 based on what he could do in the second half of the season. And also we have a little bit of teammate correlation.
Yeah.
Is that where your head's at as well?
My head would be 1 or 4. I like 2, but 2 we're banking on a trade.
Okay, so I don't mind 4 either.
I think we close the position if we take 4, and then just
I don't know about close.
We're very close to it.
I think we feel less stress. And I think we can. All right, let's take.
We both said it gets ugly.
It gets super ugly, and I think 3 might fall. So let's take 4 in our queue. Let's take them. Okay, so we take Bucky Irving. This is, I think, an underrated handcuff. He's more of a handcuff plus if he can earn that weekly receiving role. Interesting that they took him, ahead of a ton of running backs in this draft. He had the poor combine, but this was a guy sort of steaming up beforehand. Really, really can catch the ball. And Rachaad White had that incredible volume last year, but it was Dave Canales, and now Dave Canales has moved on. Maybe they work in a second running back a little bit more, which is I think what they wanted to do last year. It's just their roster was so crappy at the position. So we'll see. I think Bucky Irving's interesting. And if White goes down, Irving would be a guy who catch a ton of passes.
That was my question, Theo, is if White does miss any time, what's Irving's role going to be? I mean, is he a player that you would expect, and I know this is best ball, but would you expect top 15 numbers that week if White is out, given a neutral matchup?
I'm not sure if he'd be ranked in the top 15. I think he'd probably be a little bit more like RB20, RB21. I'm not sure how much volume he can handle as a runner, but I think he was electric at Oregon, and he actually improved the numbers at their pro day. This was but again, the combine, the 40 was just super disappointing. Mm-hmm. But NFL teams didn't punish him based off his 40. He was like the 6th running back off the board in this whole draft class. So I think Bucky Irving, they clearly is going to be the number 2 back there. I know there's still people that are into Sean Tucker, but at the end of the day, one was an undrafted free agent. I know he was hurt, all that stuff, Sean Tucker people, but Bucky Irving is the dude. They've talked him up. And also Rachaad White has talked him up as a guy who he views as like a change of pace back in the offense, and sort of talks to him about him not like some guy who's trying to, crack into a role, but as a guy that's going to help them this year. So I like Irving here. There were some wide receivers we passed up on that maybe when we look back on tonight, Terp and I could be like, we should have gone with that wide receiver. But Irving, for this sort of draft where we're playing catch up at the RB2 spot, I feel a lot better adding Irving here. I think he'll have a couple of usable weeks for us, especially in this best ball format.
What about the question I asked before? I can't remember who I addressed it to. Terp, I'm going to throw it to you. If you guys are the team that is not being the bully at tight end, or maybe another position where somebody's loading up, where you guys are kind of have to face the choice of maybe scrambling and drafting somebody, or still continuing down your path, how do you handle that in a best ball draft?
I mean, it's just really what we did when we were the bullies. So, I mean, when we're looking at the positions and how they fell to us, I mean, we are looking for, obviously, with best ball, you're looking for an upside play. With Ty Chandler and Bucky Irving and MarShawn Lloyd, 3 of our picks. I mean, we like all 3 players, and all 3 players are in uncertain situations. I know Green Bay got Josh Jacobs, and they paid him a lot of money, but MarShawn Lloyd is, I know, in our opinion, probably the best running back in this draft, or very close to it. Mm-hmm. I mean, he's right up there in the Jonathan Brooks, Trey Benson category, but I like Lloyd better than both. And I feel like he has, who's he battling with? A.J. Dillon? Was anybody really worried about A.J. Dillon?
No.
I know you, Balky, you hated A.J. Dillon last year, and people still drafted him.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we're just playing catch up a little bit, but we're not playing catch up in a way where, let's just say we punted the tight end position or punted the quarterback position. I mean, you're seeing these runs, and it puts you behind the 8 ball to reach up, 12, 15, 20 picks above ADP to get a guy who you really don't love, just to fill out your roster so you're not way, way behind the 8 ball. So, I mean, receivers are something we're going to have to catch up a little bit on, but with the bully tight end build, I don't feel like it's something that we got to really worry about that much.
And Theo, I think you said earlier, and Terp agreed, if I remember correctly, if you have to take shots on receivers, that's not a bad way to spend your last couple of picks of this draft.
No, I mean, I think that there's a scenario where all of our next few picks are wide receivers. Terp, at this point, 1 or 2 we have the correlation to. 1 could be the hammer, though.
It's definitely 1. 2 comes back to us.
Okay, so let's do it. Let's take 1. And then I put a couple other guys in the queue. I like the idea of getting 3 and 6, but I don't mind 4. I know 5 is like 5. I can't.
He's not going to excite you.
I'll throw a couple more guys in the queue. I put 1 more in the queue that sort of makes a little sense. Number 7. And I like 8 a little bit. I think he had a really good offseason so far. And he's a very safe player. Like your argument for number 5, I think 8 is that and then some.
I like it. I mean, I like 8 and 4 are the guys that I would want to get at least one of them in this draft.
I don't think it's out of the question you get both of them.
Both of them. It's definitely a possibility. And with this build, we're betting on one of the 2 to break out, because if one of the 2 break out, we're sitting with a gold minus late at a position where, in some say, we're lacking.
Yeah, I don't mind adding 1 more running back. I'm going to add a couple in the queue just for discussion's sake.
Yeah.
I think for us now, based on who we have, 1 is the one that we're gonna take if he's there at the 1604. And if he's gone, I'm sort of open here.
Yeah, if he's gone, we're definitely open. I'm good with. Let's just see. There goes one of the guys.
Yeah, so we talked about Demario Douglas, and there goes Michael Wilson, another guy.
Guys are on the clock. On deck right now for the pick at 1604. They just took Ricky Pearsall at the 1509. We'll get this pick in right now as you guys are on the clock after Aaron Rodgers goes off the board.
Yeah, so we're going to take LMC. It's LMC time.
Easy pick here. Guy we were considering in the last round. It's worked out in the last couple of rounds of guys that we pushed. We pushed Ricky Pearsall. We decided to take Bucky Irving over him, and it worked out. He came all the way back. Same thing with McCaffrey, with Jaden Daniels, with Jahan Dotson. I know, week 14 bye scares a little, people, but I don't really worry about that stuff. And getting him where we get him, one of those 2 guys break out with Daniels, and Daniels is what we expect him to be. This makes the build even better.
The build is interesting. The build is young, very, very, very young. 6 rookies now on this team. I have some questions about that. I'll ask them to Theo Gremminger and Dave Terpoilli when we come back. You're watching live FFPC Best Ball Tournament coverage here on the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network. We'll be right back after this.
Is Dynasty. And the place to play is myffpc.com. Go to myffpc, Use promo code COOP. They'll give you $25 when you deposit $35 or more. Now is the time to get in there and get set up with a startup draft. Now is the time, now that the rookies and everyone are set, because you can go in and you can start the draft and, you draft your Justin Jeffersons and Jamar Chases. And now that we know where the rookies are and where they're landing, you get going on that. So you want to try and set a startup draft for this week coming up if you're not involved yet. So go get involved. Use the QR code here or use the promo code that's in the link in the description here and get yourself going on Dynasty so you can really enjoy these players and draft the players you believe in. If you like Michael Penix Jr., you got to play Dynasty because you got to wait for him, but the payoff is big. And same with like Pearsall and Jackson Smith and Jigba and all these guys. Get in and do that. And I'll tell you what, the orphan leagues over there that we've been talking about, those all got bought up. They're actually all sold. People from this show I know took over a bunch of them. So right now, startups is the way to go. That's the way to rock and roll. It is startup season. Startup season and rookie draft season. That's what's up. Get set up at myffpc.com. Use promo code COOP. They'll give you $25 when you deposit $35 or more and give you a leg up. No dealing with chasing around your friends and making them pay dues and having your buddy be like, oh, dude, I got to quit the league because I got a dog and I can't pay attention no more and I don't want to do trades. Forget all that. You can play online, MyFFPC, high stakes, low stakes, whatever you want to do with experts. And if somebody leaves the league, it goes in that orphan pool and somebody picks it up. The league has never been disbanded on FFPC.com. That's directly from Eric Balkman over there has told me that. So that's what's up. Get set up.
The best ball tournament coverage rolls on here on the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network. Theo Gremminger and Dave Terpoilli drafting for a $300,000 grand prize. You can join them when you go to myffpc.com. That's myffpc.com. Click on that link for the best ball tournament, register, and get your teams in. $125 entry fee in competing for a grand prize that is $100,000 more than it was last year. Go to myffpc.com to register. Of course, Theo Gremminger from Player Profiler at the OG Fantasy on the X. Dave Terpoilli is at Dave Terp on the X as well. Pearsall and McCaffrey make it 3 straight rookies. Theo, there's a lot of youth on this team. We often say that the rookies are undervalued when you're drafting early. Are they being undervalued even now here in June?
Yeah, I do think there's a chance that especially Bucky Irving, I think is going to move up around when it comes a little more apparent of his contingent upside. And then Pearsall's the one, though. Like if there's and again, I'm not necessarily betting on a Brandon Ayuk trade, but if Brandon Ayuk is traded, Pearsall's going to move up 4 or 5 rounds. Like 4 rounds, I think, is legit. And then maybe even a little bit higher. He's a super, super athlete. And San Francisco's been really spot on where their last 2 picks of wide receivers in that range of the NFL draft were Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk. So we sort of bet on them to kind of draft these uber athletic guys. You also have the fact that George Kittle's 30 years old. So there's 2 older guys in Samuel and Kittle, and then Brandon Ayuk could get traded. So the pathway for Pearsall being a target in that offense is there. He's also gotten a ton of reps, which matters for a guy like Shanahan with Ayuk missing time. Terp, we're OTC here. The number 1 doesn't excite me as much, but it kind of makes sense with our correlation.
It makes sense, but I wouldn't cry if we pushed him and it didn't come back. I would rather take somebody with a little more juice, 6 or 2.
I think I like the
5
idea
is just as good as 1, really. I like 1, but I'd be okay with 5 and would be okay.
I'm going to defer to you because I think for me 6 and 2 are similar bets. Why don't we go with 2? I think we don't have anybody from this team, but it's a really ambiguous situation.
Let's add another rookie to this show.
Yeah, let's add Javon Baker. And again, Javon Baker, maybe he's going to end up being another cliche term. I don't want to be that guy, but the hashtag better in best ball type guys. Javon Baker had 5 catches over 50 yards last year at UCF. Javon Baker walks into the room. He thinks he's the best player on the entire team. He's got that kind of swag to him.
And he might be.
and he might be. There's a lot of people who are very smart. Nelson Sousa, Cody Carpentier, a lot of Matty Kiwoom, a lot of guys that I've like worked with or drafted with that are really into Javon Baker. I'm sort of I've taken shots on Polk and Baker. I think they're both decent shots. And we talked about Demario Douglas. I think with those three guys, there's a chance that 2 out of the 3 beat expectations, and the expectations are so low. There's two out of the 3 actually beat expectations kind of considerably. Javon Baker, he's interesting though, guys. He's interesting.
He is very interesting, and he was a guy that, I mean, I was much more excited in my rookie drafts to draft him rather than Jalen Polk, and then all of a sudden those guys got very, very close in rookie drafts too, and then I'm like, okay, am I taking the 4th round guy over the 2nd round guy? I don't think I can do that yet. I know you guys are coming up, but the Baker pick is very interesting. The McCaffrey pick is interesting too. Now, this makes it 4 straight rookies that you've drafted, 7 rookies on your team so far. You're in the hole right now. Talking about McCaffrey, Terp, what's his role going to be this year in Washington?
I mean, there's talks of him getting handoffs. I mean, a Curtis Samuel clone type of situation. I mean, the possibilities are endless with Kingsbury. I mean, Jaden Daniels is obviously the most exciting rookie quarterback that we've probably seen in a little bit. Has the rushing upside, and if he figures out one of these 2 guys to go with Scary Terry, I mean, the McCaffrey, in my opinion, could have a couple, preseason, blurbs that you see pop up even more than he's getting now, and he can move up a couple rounds because the excitement's there surrounding him. He's quiet. I mean, it's quiet right now, but that's exactly what we like because we're getting him free pretty much. I mean, 16th, 20th round type of players are free. And you can pretty much mix and match them and try to, strike lightning in the bottle. Is there a chance he just totally flops out? Of course, but we saw Jahan Dotson last year not do much. So even though we drafted Jahan Dotson, if one of those 2 pair well with Jahan Dotson, we're sitting with gold mines. And I'm very excited because McCaffrey's one of my highest known players.
So the guys are on the clock again at the 18:04. Go ahead, Theo.
Yeah, so Terp, here again, we're sort of wide open. I almost think that 6 is interesting because I think a couple of these other guys are going to be there in rounds 19 and 20. We don't really need 6, but 6 I think has sort of huge contingent upside because of the quality of the offense, and I think the quality of the player.
About him, there's no questions whatsoever. There also is this that I just put in, not yet, but if there's a world where we don't like talking about it in these streets, but it gets this position switch.
Yeah, that's the one. I thought about throwing him in there too. Let's take 6. What do you think?
Yep. Pick.
Yeah. So Will Shipley's a little bit of a luxury pick. I know that there's the whole Kenny Gainwell people out there. Like, I think Gainwell is definitely a Nick Sirianni favorite.
He's annoying, but at the end of the day, not really somebody I'm worried
about. If Saquon misses time, Will Shipley is a dude.
And isn't there something to be said, the fact that, they knew what they had in Gainwell, and yet they went out and drafted Shipley too?
100%. 100%.
I mean, when you have that, like that's kind of like in a rare situation where I would lean on the rookie over the veteran, especially in best ball too. And given what Shipley was able to do and how well-rounded he was at Clemson, I think he's a player that, he's a fun best ball guy, but he could develop into much more if, knock on wood, if anything happens to the starter in Philly. And I'm not going to say his name because I know Terp would be like, don't jinx me now.
Bucky, 7 rookies through 17 rounds.
That's awesome. And that's so much fun to see all those rookies.
I don't think I missed any.
No, I think you got 8. Right?
8. Jaden Daniels, I missed them. Sorry.
Right. So it's Harrison, it's Daniels, it's Lloyd, Irving, Pearsall, McCaffrey, Baker, Shipley. That's 8. And you've taken 5 in a row. I thought when Troy Franklin went off the board that, okay, then no way is it going to be a rookie here. And then you guys still found a way to make it work. So kudos to you. And
Troy Franklin would have definitely probably been the pick if he would have made it.
And yeah, like I think Troy Franklin is a fine bet as well here. But I don't mind it. I feel like we didn't reach for any of these young players. It all sort of fell to us.
You guys are coming up in the 19th round here. What do you make of, I look at a team like Team 11 where they just pound running backs and receivers for the first 8 rounds, but then you noticed 4 quarterbacks, you noticed 3 tight ends, and the depth at running back and receiver. I don't know how much it has to be there as you're going for $300K, but I don't know if that would be a build that you guys would be in favor of, right?
I don't think 4 quarterbacks, when you get Trevor Lawrence and Jared Goff, I think if you want to go with a QB3, I think that's fine. But I think the Bryce Young pick was sort of like a superfluous one. And, I've gotten caught holding the Colby Parkinson bag, but I don't want to go 17th round Colby Parkinson. I'd rather have him a little bit later, but it was sort of necessary. Isaiah Likely for them as well. Like, they're really betting on Cade Otton being able to kind of hold it down at the tight end spot. So I don't know. That's sort of for me, it's a tough way to win. Now, I don't know if this manager is doing a ton of entries. I never know. A lot of people are like kind of incognito. I'm always Gremminger in these drafts that I'm doing by myself. So I'm easy to find, but a lot of people kind of change it up. But I mean, I think that they had some structure. I almost think if you look at it, they should have gone with maybe staying away from Jalen Warren and going a different route in round 7. And I think they might have liked their team a little more. They had 3 running backs early that I think we could all bet on sort of volume early in the year.
How much value do you guys see in these last couple of rounds? I mean, is it just dart throws, or are there players that are worth their so? And I guess you're on the clock again, so I'll let you talk about that after you make the pick.
Yeah, so Terp, I feel like it's number 2 for us, but you could talk me into number 3.
It's number 2. It's not really even a question. We said we push it. To me, it was Zay Jones or
yeah. So we end up getting our correlation, our Arizona correlation. Greg Dortch is one that Kyler Murray's always talking up, and he had some nice weeks with Kyler last year. So I think that's a fine pick. I think number 2, it could make it back to us as well.
Dortch is the pick at 1909 tonight for the guys. And Terp, in regards to Dortch, with Harrison and McBride having so many targets on that team this year, and when you throw Trey Benson into the mix as well, is Dortch a guy that still can carve out a role here, or are you just expecting, maybe a couple of Boffo weeks if one of those target hogs goes down?
Yeah, I mean, the guys above him outside of Marvin Harrison have questions. I mean, Michael Wilson, burst on the scene a little bit last year, but he wasn't anything special, even though I like the player. I mean, Zay Jones went from being a fantasy darling in 22 to last year just obviously getting hurt, but, not really doing much even when he wasn't hurt. And that team just overall was a disaster. So, I mean, they love him. So he's still around. Kyler Murray talks about him. The coaching staff talks about him. Do I think he's going to be a superstar? No, but he's a guy that can get us some serviceable weeks at a position where most say we're a little bit weak. And if Kyler Murray goes nuts, Marvin Harrison goes nuts, we have another option. And that's really all we're trying to build with this.
As we come into your 20th round pick, you guys are 3 picks away right now. We look at the roster construction that you have. You have 2 quarterbacks. You have 3 tight ends on this team. I'm counting up the running backs. It looks like you have 6 of them right now. I'm counting up the receivers. It looks like you have 8 of them. Do you guys feel the need to add at a certain position here with this last pick?
No, I think we could go either way. Between running back and wide receiver. And I also think, like, based on how we've caught up, if there was a tight end that would have fallen here, we could have gone back to that well. But Terp, I like our Q. I threw in 6 because it's the ultimate like doomsday pick. You could look at it as sort of burning a pick. But if one really bad thing happens I don't even want to throw it out there into existence for your place. Yeah, I'm not throwing it out there, but it's not like the guy hasn't missed some time before. We might be sitting really pretty nicely if that happened.
If we're going to waste a pick, which I would never classify anything as a wasted pick. Am I blanking out on 5 here? I know he's a little down on the depth chart, but it correlates with week 17 with the Arizona bet. He has that big playability. I'm not pumping the table or anything for him. I think eventually we're going to take 2 here, but
I think I hear what you're saying. I think 2 and 3 are both those boring plays that sort of correlate to what we have and make more sense.
Correlates with
5.
Ingram. I'm still good with 2 though. I like the 2 pick.
2's fine, and it's sort of your anti Jerry Jeudy play, and it's hey, the guy's going to have a couple of usable weeks. If we get any kind of usable weeks out of round 20, I'll say that the guy that we were considering, I don't want to even put it out there. The whole city of Philadelphia is going to be cursing me out, but we already took Will Shipley. I threw out this is not going to be our last bullet in the 125 tournament. Terp and I are going to draft another team. To have a Will Shipley, Kenneth Gainwell doomsday scenario team, it's not what you want to see happen. But
no, you could also tell a story where it could happen, because Barkley has plenty of questions. I mean, drafters hate him this year, but he got paid a lot.
Yeah, that's right. And shout out to Team 10.
Yeah, who's in the YouTube chat?
Who's in the YouTube chat? Yeah, your Sam Laporta pick I liked a lot. Your Malik Neighbors pick I liked a lot. I thought you did some, and your Trey Benson. You sniped us certainly on Trey Benson. We would have taken Trey Benson ahead of Chase Brown, especially with our structure, and I would make that trade right now. So it was good drafting with you, Team 10.
Team 10, definitely. But the Laporta pick probably opened us up to the draft that we had, because if we take Laporta there, we probably still take Kyle Pitts, but then where do we go in round 4? Do we still go Ingram, and then we're way behind the 8 ball at the receiver position. So we made the best out of the situation. Obviously, we would have preferred Laporta, but no downside whatsoever in Marvin Harrison.
So guys, I mean, initially, as we just have a few minutes left of the show, you're done with the draft on a scale of 0 being this was a total failure of a draft to 10 where you feel really, really good about this team winning the 300K. What number would you put on this one?
I feel really good about this team, Terp. I don't know about you.
I see no downside. I don't get very excited with these drafts anymore because I do so many of them. But I mean, this is as good as I could draw up. I mean, quarterbacks, no issues. Tight ends, no issues. Wide receivers, in my opinion, no issues. If you're going to pick, I guess you pick the running back position as the one. But I mean, if we can just get Chase Brown to be what we think he's going to be, and then Chandler and Jones be that 60-40 split type of situation, and get something from maybe a Josh Jacobs, missed a couple of weeks. I never wish injuries on anybody. This could definitely be a team that sneaks into the playoffs, but then turns into like a heat-seeking missile by the time it comes to win the 300,000. So
yeah, I mean, really, for me, it's this team needs Breece Hall to stay healthy.
1,000%.
At the end of the day, though, you need your first-round pick to stay healthy to be in contention for any real money anyway.
If those tight ends don't work out, this team's in trouble.
That is a good point too. Like if we're looking at tight ends 9, 10, and 13 on the year, then yeah, this team is probably drawing dead as well.
How much stock do you put in? And Theo, I'll throw this to you first. How much stock do you put in? Like David Njoku had some really, really good games last year, but a lot of them were with Joe Flacco rather than Deshaun Watson. It seems like you and Terp are still on board with Njoku having a good season this year, but it's going to be with, I don't want to say different quarterback because he was okay with Watson last year, but he really came into his own with Joe Flacco.
Yeah, I talked about it earlier. I just think it's how do you put that away when you saw David Njoku do that for that significant?
Regardless of the quarterback, Cleveland is going to find a way. You're saying?
Yeah, and I think Ken Dorsey is the right offensive coordinator for this team. Cleveland had a ton of plays per game last year, and it didn't necessarily correlate to a ton of scoring. They had their run with Flacco, but like Watson looked pretty good in that Baltimore game, gets hurt, and I'm pretty bullish on this offense this year. I also think the fact that Nick Chubb, we don't know when he's going to be back, sort of is like they're going to lean on Njoku as well. So Njoku doesn't have to be what he was in the fantasy playoffs. I mean, Terp and I would love that, but then you're talking about a guy who's challenging for tight end 1 overall. I think he's just got to be sort of 80% of that, and I think that's perfectly doable. How do you get away from that? How do you not scheme for that when you saw it and he was so effective doing things like tight end screens, utilizing him early, getting him the ball in the first quarter? It puts a lot of pressure on defenses because he's such a great athlete and such a mismatch against a lot of NFL defenses. So for me, it's like David Njoku, he took a next step sort of in his career progression. We've been waiting for it for a long time with Njoku to see that sort of consistent play. And again, the guy's only 28 years old. 28 years old for tight ends, that's perfectly fine.
Terp, based on how you and Theo reacted in the first round, is Breece Hall your favorite pick of the draft tonight?
I hate saying the first round pick is my favorite pick,
but because you never
didn't expect
contemplated
it. We really didn't talk that much at all regarding this. I mean, I told him when we got the pick, I said the Bijan Robinson dream is over, and that's about it, because we really didn't think any of these guys that would fall to us. We thought we'd be deciding between A.J. Brown or Puka, Garrett Wilson, players like that, maybe Justin Jefferson, maybe St. Brown, but definitely never Breece Hall. So we're very, very happy with the pick. Besides that, my favorite pick is Chase Brown. I love Chase Brown.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. And again, like Bulky, a big credit to what you've done with this show. You have like a super educated group of viewers who make very good points, and they're experienced drafters with skin in the game. Big respect to you guys in the chat. But somebody made a point, Terp, is like, would we like our team better if we would have leaned into one of those 7th round running backs?
No,
I don't think so. So I understand where people are at right there, but if it was like a Ramondre Stevenson instead of David Njoku, we still probably go Kyler Murray, and we're having to take another tight end and maybe pass up one of those upside RBs. And I think that, like, we hate talking about injuries, but Zach Moss goes down, Josh Jacobs goes down, Aaron Jones goes down, Rashad White goes down, Saquon Barkley goes down. We're sitting on a bunch of these guys who have juice, are all athletic, and can all catch the football. So I don't know. I think it's hard to kind of play like revisionist history when it comes to like live drafts like this.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I respect the point, but I don't think I would like this team more if I could make that trade.
Yeah, the only pick that I look back at that I had any questions, and the only one I really probably didn't really agree on, was Njoku over F1. I mean, I probably would have leaned F1, but when you look at the overall build and you try to be different without being, we talked about it before. Some of these people just get too crazy with builds. They start off 4 tight ends and a quarterback and just get too wacky, sort of what Team 2 did. But Njoku will just separate us from, nobody's going to have this build. I mean, I would have to look at Stack Finder on Mojo to see how many guys would have this build, but I'm going to guess it's probably none.
Yeah, Mackenzie Kramer, who was last night's guest on the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour, he points out, he said, great team. His main issue is Njoku over McLaurin. But Theo, if I remember correctly, that it was pretty close between those two players for you at that spot.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think it could have gone either way on those. I think they both would have made some sense structurally, and I have exposure to both. So yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I'm okay with both. And then at the end of the day, that's just the kind of way this build went. And then also one kind of underrated aspect of going with what we did is we took a bunch of shots on some unknown upside wide receivers, where it's sort of like we're not just throwing darts at rookies. There's pathways for those guys this year, especially in this best ball format, to have these spike weeks.
And
a good point by Mac Nova. We didn't know we'd get Daniels at that point too.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Yes, totally. We have this was so much fun tonight, guys. I learned so much. I'm trying to soak it all in. I'm trying to be a sponge. Hopefully this draft was sponge worthy for my brain to soak it in so I can get all this stuff for my own drafts. Theo, I know you just had a new Dynasty Life podcast come out, which is awesome. Tell the listeners and the viewers, I guess, what they should be paying attention to for you going forward with everything you have in the hopper over at Player Profiler.
Yeah, so I think the people in this chat, this is a redraft kind of centric crowd. I'm putting out a lot of Dynasty Life, which has been a really successful show for me, and had a lot of support from FFPC people as well. But press coverage and First Class Fantasy with Billy Muzio, those two shows, I think we're doing some really, really good things. Darren Armani, Fantasy Mojo, was on with me last week talking about FFPC ADP, high stakes ADP. And then I had Nelson Sousa, who I think is one of the best players in the country, and I've split some teams with. He came on and we talked about some targets and fades. I've got Dwayne McFarland coming up. I've got John Daigle coming up. Billy Muzio and I have Pat Fitzmaurice coming up. So we're really trying to find people edges to help them win. We have skin in the game ourselves. We talk about high stakes and respect high stakes. I think there's a lot of shows and a lot of people out there that are smart fantasy analysts, but don't necessarily talk the same language that the FFPC drafter and some of your competitors speak.
Yeah.
And I think I do. And I think that it becomes really actionable for also the people that don't play FFPC, but they play home leagues that are competitive. They see like sort of what the sharp high stakes people are doing, team structure, and all those sort of edges that we have to do to win. It's harder and harder to win every year in the FFPC. And I think we're going to try to help people do as well as they can this year and hopefully win some money. We've also got Dan Williamson. We've got Mike Shope. We've got Adam Krautwurst. We've got so many, Billy Muzio, I've mentioned. We've got so many sharp voices who sort of speak the language that your audience speaks over at Player Profiler right now. And I'm really proud of what we've done to, I think, put ourselves like first and foremost at the top of the list for high stakes fantasy football content.
It's so great. It's so great. I mean, there's so many podcasts. You do an excellent job over there. Obviously, with Dynasty Life, what we talked about, but press coverage, first class fantasy. My personal favorite is the Sonic Truth, because I think that it's all great to have great content, which all those do. But I think you guys have this magic, chemistry with you and Alan Soslowski, and obviously the Podfather. It's like a three-man weave, right? You guys know when to lay out, you know when to stop talking when Podfather takes over. Podfather can kind of sense when he knows that this is going to be a good bit. That's my favorite show on there. It is so good.
Alan Soslowski is so. I mean, I highly recommend Alan's stuff over at RotoWire as well. Yep. He's such a good guy to podcast with. Obviously, everybody knows Matt, but Alan is like hilarious, really keeps the show moving well. So yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I would be remiss if I also didn't mention Chris Vaccaro podcast with us during the season. He's an NFFC Hall of Famer who's done well in FFPC leagues as well. So another high stakes, highly successful person over at Player Profiler. So, you play high stakes, where you want to get your content.
At the OG Fantasy on X to follow Theo and Terp. We will follow you at Dave Terp, and you're on FFPC draft coverage this Tuesday night, right?
Tuesday, we have Nelson coming on to go over Fantasy Pros draft, and me, Aiden, will be there interviewing him, getting his knowledge. Like you said, Theo, he's probably one of the best, if not the top. He's on the short list of the best players in the world. So to get him on there and get the knowledge will be great for the show. I mean, definitely tune in for that. I think it's 8:30. We'll be starting. So definitely Nelson will be on. It'll definitely be a lot of fun.
It was a lot of fun tonight, guys. Congratulations on a fantastic draft. Thank you so much for joining me. As a reminder, myffpc.com is your home for the Fantasy Pros Championship, the main event, the best ball tournament, like these guys just did a draft in tonight, and of course, Empire and Dynasty startups over at myffpc.com as well. We'll be back next Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern time for 2 full hours. It's going to be a lot of fun. For our producer, Matt Deutsch, my co-host tonight, Theo Gremminger and Dave Terpoilli, I'm Eric Balkman. Thanks so much for watching the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network. God bless everybody.
See you guys.